All right, guys, so today we are going to be learning about heredity, or the odds of you becoming you and not your brother or sister. What were those chances of you getting those specific traits from your parents? Remember, we've been focusing on meiosis and how your parents' sex cells were created and how their chromosomes were split up and shuffled around to be independently assorted into individual sex cells. So, remember that we've learned about those sex cells, sperm and egg. And why was it that even though Mario and Luigi had the same parents, why is it that one of them was a little bit taller than the other, a little bit rounder, etc.? Why did they turn out so different even though they had the same parents? How did meiosis result in that? And of course, we've learned how the sex cells are generated through the shuffling of the chromosomes, and each sex cell gets a different type of chromosome, right? So what are the odds of this this egg being fertilized by the sperm, etc.? Now, the first guy to really ask this question and try and figure this out and not just assume that we just got blended together by our parents' traits was a gentleman named Gregor Mendel back in the 1850s. He planted peas in a monastery, so he was a monk. And he actually became really curious about how those traits in the peas were passed on. So he looked at, okay, if I have a parent in the pea plant that has the flower colors purple and white, right? Both the parents had purple and white. Why did the offspring all turn purple? And if I had the parents with yellow seeds and green seeds, why did all of my offspring turn yellow? Again, same thing with seed shape. If the parents were round and wrinkled, why did the first generation of offspring all get round traits? He asked these questions. That's what we're going to try and work through today. Now, of course, he was one of the first people to unknowingly be studying the passing on of traits through chromosomes, but this is just a quick review to help us remember that chromosomes contain DNA which has specific genes which code for specific proteins that give us our physical traits. Again, here's that chromosome, and then remember that inside the chromosome is this DNA that's wound up really tightly, and these segments of DNA are what we call genes. And these individual genes, as we see here, are made up of the A's, the C's, the T's, and the G's of DNA that we learned about. And of course, these are nucleotides. And remember, if we changed one of those nucleotides out, we could have a completely different protein created. However, humans, it's not this simple because unfortunately we are very polygenic in that multiple genes are required to create one single physical trait. So remember, as we walk through this, even though I may use simplified examples like hair color, eye color, and skin color, that sometimes these are a lot more complicated because multiple genes code for these. I will be sticking today, though, to a Mendelian trait. So these are traits that are coded for by just one single gene. One single location on a chromosome can be changed and affect that gene. Of course, this is an ode to Gregor Mendel himself because he was studying those Mendelian genes. They were just coded for by one single gene. Just again, bringing us back to the stuff that we've learned before in our GMO unit, thinking about this DNA and how it codes for RNA. And then that RNA is what is read by the ribosome, and here is where the ribosome pieces together those amino acids based on the RNA code. And if we change out that amino acid, remember that the protein will then ultimately be different. Now, one human Mendelian trait that's really quite interesting and strange is that of earwax. So whether or not you have really waxy ears is determined on the 16th chromosome. And we get a gene. We can either get the dominant gene, which is coded for, we give it a brief letter to show it is big D. So we show that by big D's, meaning that it's going to have wet ears. Now, if you happen to get the gene for dry ears, you're going to have a little d. Now, this is as simple as changing out your DNA code from an ACG to an AAC in that DNA. So remember how we learned about codon and those 3 base pairs? So if we change that out, if we have wet ears, we're going to have these amino acid sequence because ACG in our DNA would code for this threonine amino acid to be placed here. But if you've got the other gene, the DNA is going to read AAC, and instead, through our protein synthesis, we are going to substitute out a new amino acid, glycine, and that means that you are going to get a dry earwax, a dry ear instead of a wet earwax. So one little simple base pair change in our DNA can make pretty significant changes in our life. Now, of course, remember, you get 1 copy of each allele from mom and dad on the 16th chromosome. So dad over here could give you that little d allele, and you could get an allele for dry earwax from dad, while mom could give you the wet earwax allele, or the big D. Okay? So again, you get 1 trait from mom and 1 from dad, and if you get that big D, remember, that's going to be that dominant trait. So what are the odds? You've got mom's wet earwax here, you've got dad's earwax here, dry earwax here. Remember that these are their phenotypes or their physical traits. So what are the odds of you getting that phenotype? I mean, are you just basically doomed to having those wet, waxy ears because your mom has the dominant trait? Not necessarily. But again, just to review that concept of dominance, remember that a dominant allele can mask or suppress the expression of another allele, while a recessive allele can be covered up by a dominant allele and not be expressed. Whenever we represent these alleles, we're always going to use the capital letter to represent the dominant allele and the lowercase letter to represent the recessive allele. So, let's say that our hypothetical parents here, these would be our mom's parents, right? So the grandparents of this future baby that has not even been born yet. So if mom's parents gave her these alleles, her mom gave her big D, and her dad gave her little d, then that would be her genotype. Remember, that is her genetic makeup. Her genotype would be these letters, big D, little d. Mom would have waxy ears due to that dominant trait. What we call this when we have one of each type of allele, so she got the dominant allele and the recessive allele, we would call this a heterozygote. That means she contains 1 copy of each allele for earwax. So, big D, little d is going to code in our genetic makeup to give us the phenotype or the trait of having wet, waxy ears. Whereas on dad's side, if we check it out here, dad's mom gave him little d, while dad's dad gave him little d. So that makes his genotype or the genetic makeup homozygous recessive. Say that word to yourself, homozygous recessive. What that means is that it is 2 of the same recessive alleles, or little d, meaning this guy over here, dad, he's going to have dry ears. So again, understanding that the alleles or our genotype codes for our phenotype, our physical traits. We wouldn't have our physical traits without our genetic makeup. So if we're looking at our family tree here, we've got the 4 grandparents, mom's mom, mom's dad, dad's dad, or dad's mom, dad's dad, and the traits that they gave them, mom being a heterozygote for big D, little d, dad being homozygous recessive or little d, what are the odds of them passing these traits on to their offspring? what are the odds of the offspring having waxy ears? I want you to pause the video for just a moment and actually think through that question. What are the odds if these two parents had a child that they would pass on their earwax traits? Okay, so of course, to start, we have to look at mom's possible egg combinations through meiosis, right? So mom could possibly make an egg that contains the big D allele. She could make another egg that could contain the big D allele, because remember we make 4 eggs. She could make an egg that contains the little d allele. She could make another egg of the little d allele. So just right here and looking at this, just at looking at mom, we know mom has a 50% chance of having one of these eggs fertilized to create an offspring with waxy ears. So right there, 50% chance that mom is going to pass on this waxy ear allele. Whereas when we look at dad, since dad is homozygous recessive, or his only alleles that he has are little d, the possible sperm he could create are all going to be little d's. So every single sperm he creates are going to be little d's. Now, yes, we could theoretically sit here and kind of pair together all of the different possible combinations, but if we do this through a mathematical approach, we can use a Punnett square, which I think some of you have heard of before, to help us actually figure out the percentage of the chance that dad's sperm will fertilize which egg of mom. So if we create one of these Punnett squares, the way we set these up is that we are going to put mom's alleles, her possible chromosome combinations, on the top. So this is representing that this egg is going to go here, and that one contained the big D allele, or the waxy ear trait. And this egg is going to go here. Then the dad's sperm is going to go on the left-hand side, and remember he was homozygous recessive, so both of his are little d's. Now, what we're doing in these boxes, when we come together and put these boxes here, is we are trying to figure out what are the possible odds of this baby receiving these 2 chromosomes. See if you can just practice filling this out in your notebook and try and remind yourself from, back in your other science classes, can you still do these Punnett squares? What do you think about these? So how'd it go? Were you able to actually create this Punnett square? What did it look like for you? Go ahead and let's double check our answers together, because what we're looking at here, again, what are the odds that this egg will be fertilized by this sperm? To figure that out, we're going to put our information into this box. And how we do that is we pull this D down into this box, and we pull this allele over into this box. And if this sperm were to fertilize this egg, this is the baby's alleles that it would receive. It would receive a big D allele from mom and a little d allele from dad. Well, now what about this one? What if this egg were fertilized by this sperm? Again, we pull down this little d and pull over this little d, and if we had this offspring here, then this offspring would have little d. So that would be its genotype. If we pulled down this big D here, if this egg were to be fertilized by this sperm, we'd get a big D here from mom and a little d from dad, and this baby would have this genotype, big D, little d. Same thing over here. If we were to have this egg fertilized by this sperm, we would pull down the little d from mom and the little d from dad, giving us a homozygous recessive genotype. So we're not saying that they're having forked babies, right? We're saying, what are the odds if they were to have a baby that it would have that genotype? And since it's just a single allele, we have 4 possible combinations, because we have 2 eggs, 2 sperm. 2 times 2 gives us 4, so there's 4 possible combinations, and this shows us those combinations. So we can break this down into ratios to tell us the chances. So our phenotypic ratio would look like this because look, we would have